in my opinion, being able to put together and have in Austin, Texas, affiliated with the University of Texas at Austin, a medical school, a teaching hospital, a modern state-of-the-art teaching hospital, and what I would consider to be uniquely Austin healthcare clinics in our community. And so we really do have a health science center that involves research and scientific discovery and all those things. We can talk more in detail if you'd like. But I think it's one of the biggest things that can happen to Austin and Central Texas. And I really mean maybe since the decision to put the University of Texas at Austin in Austin, Texas. And we've talked about it a long time. Like I said, Liz and I got here in 1981, and really since that time, there's always been some discussion about why is there no medical school in Austin? We need to have a medical school and what it would mean. Now, I've got some theories about why it's been a little slow coming along, but there has been, over the past several years, extraordinary work that's been done at the University of Texas, with Seton and UT Southwestern, with the healthcare district for Travis County, and in a variety of other things. I don't mean to slight anybody or anything, but you've had a lot of extraordinary work that's kind of led us to a point where, in my view, we are ready to say now is the time. I think that it's required some political will that has not really been there. I think it's required, it's going to require us to navigate a very complex path that really the plan hadn't been put together up until now, and we're really starting on that. And I think there has been almost a part of the political will failure has been a fear of failure. Who's going to really step out there and say, now's the time to do it, and here's the process for trying to bring it about, for fear, ooh, it won't work. So back on September 20th, I said, here are 10 things that I think this city needs to do in 10 years. And boy, the response has been extraordinary. It's been very positive, really like nothing I've been involved in since I've been involved in public life.
Why do you think the timing is right? Talk a little bit more about that, and then you can lay out the components a little bit more. Because it does seem like a lot of things have matured, and you picked a really good time for it.
Yeah, well, let me go real broad, and then I'll try to get narrower. Look, Austin is, in my opinion, in another transition. And I said this before. The city of Austin, as I read its history or write its history, however you want to phrase that, has gone through several transitions. The first is the first transition is what I would call settlement. When the place was decided that this was going to be a city, and Edwin Waller kind of took the lead on laying out the city of Austin, and it was interesting because when that was done, it's basically what we now know as our downtown. The southern border was the Colorado River. The eastern border was Waller Creek. The western border was Shoal Creek. And the northern border was a hill they called Capitol Hill. And interestingly enough, some people tell me that they named the hill just north of that and called it College Hill. And of course, we know what that became. That transition lasted until, I would say, the way I kind of characterize it, until the dams were finally built on the rivers. And that was kind of a stability point in time, where not only they stabilized the river, but they stabilized the economy. And it really was an economy that was based upon a growing university and state government. Then the next transition happened about 35 years ago. And that was what I would refer to as the SMART time. And that is when Austin went from being a college town that state government dominated its stable economy into a focal point in a worldwide information and knowledge economy. And I can get into all detail on that, but that transition, we've been in that transition, and I think now we're moving into, if we do this right, into the next transition, which is kind of a point in time where we build upon our knowledge economy at the very same time we enhance quality of life through better health care. Now, that's a long way of getting to the point that part of the reason I think now's the time is because in a lot of ways, we're maturing to the point that now's the time. We really weren't a business community that could compete with other communities when it came to wanting to create jobs and healthcare through a healthcare industry. Frankly, a lot of people, a lot of folks I've talked to will tell you that's one of the reasons that back in the late 50s, early 60s, San Antonio got the medical school instead of Austin. In addition to that, there's been so much investment go into research and healthcare type activities over the last decade. Things like what you have seen just recently. There was an announcement that Seton and UT Southwestern, their research institute that they have created together, that is, they just hired their first executive director. And he's a guy from the National Institutes of Health. I mean, he is a superstar. So there's been we have a number of residency programs, 11 residency programs in Austin right now. We are right at 300 third and fourth year students and residents in the community. So a lot of investments going into. So I think we're at that point where not only have we transitioned as a community, but the immediate investment we've seen in healthcare makes it now the time to take that next big step.
Have you seen, are there other models for this? I'm intrigued by the mixture of government, enterprise, but also the community-based element of this seems to me to be pretty innovative.
Well, there's not as much as you might expect, and I think we're in essence we're writing a new playbook. The old playbook and the way people like to think of things is they say we need to have a medical school. State, give us a medical school, and they'll plop down a medical school, and then the next city will say we need a medical school. Well, there's your medical school. Well, with all that's gone on, everything from state budgeting to different approaches to things, I don't think that's the future. I think the future, frankly, of higher education and medical, generally, and medical schools specifically, is going to be that it's going to require a partnership, a coalition, if you will, a public-private partnership that includes not only a great Tier 1 research university, but also the system itself. It will also include the business community. It will include, and by business community, I think you talk more specifically about those who provide health care in the business community. And in Austin, that's like Seton and St. David's. Those are our two big pillars. It's going to require the community through things like the Central Health, which is our Travis County Healthcare District. And then it's going to require philanthropy. Otherwise, you can't get it all done. You can't fund it all. So it's going to require really a community effort. And I've been very gratified with the reaction from the community.
It all sounds great. Let's talk a little bit about some of the obstacles, just to be fair.
Sure.
I mean, there are a lot of things. There
are none. I gave a speech, right? Doesn't that cover it?
There are a lot of things that do seem very propitious. The maturation of the city, the industrial base, the mood in a way. There's some almost intangibles. But we're also living in a time of scarcity and economic uncertainty. At the state level, obviously, this was the last session, as much as any session we've seen, perhaps, at least in a while. There was not a lot of appetite for new programs, for spending money, and even beyond that, I saw another talk this morning, and I was struck by the sense that the lack of revenue is accepted as a state of nature rather than a political choice at this point. How do we go in that environment?
Well, first of all, that's why I think there's one aspect to that that is part of the last answer I gave. We have to develop a new playbook, and that's what I'm trying to lead on, is the creation of a new playbook where we are as a community coming together with a variety of tools and assets and putting it together in an effort to achieve certain goals, because we are in a different time. But here's the other thing. I really believe that an investment in something like a medical school, particularly in a place like Austin, Texas, that has so many assets. First of all, I would argue that the investment ought to be made, if for no other reason, because of past investment. This community has made such a significant past investment, it would be wrong not to take it to the next step where you can completely fulfill that initial investment. But the other part about it is this. There really, in my view, is no state economy. Now, we talk about, we look at numbers as the state, and we talk about Texas as a whole, and we take a lot of pride in that from time to time. But really, the state economy is the sum of its regional component parts. And we are going to need to advocate strongly for making the investment that will strengthen some of our regions. You know, some of the conservative estimates I've seen that if we do things like have a medical school in Austin, Texas, and some of the other aspects to it, what you could do is you would create 15,000 permanent jobs, have about $3 billion in economic activity, and that benefits the entire state. We are going to have to recognize that even in a time of wanting to be smart and maybe scarce resources, we have to make investment in the long term. We have to make investment in certain types of infrastructure if we want to have jobs. We're going to have to make investment in certain type of infrastructure if we're going to want to have quality health care. We have to make these investments or our economy will ultimately suffer. I got to tell you, I look at this room and we got some young folks in this room, and I'm worried for them. Because what I'm worried about is that if we're not careful, we're going to create the first generation of Texans that don't inherit any excess infrastructure as they try to build their economy. I mean, let's face it, somebody my age, I got here in '81, when Liz and I got here, there was excess road capacity. There was excess, we had lots of doctors. We're behind on doctors in this state. We're behind on doctors here locally. There were enough nurses. Well, we're behind on that in Texas and here locally. There was enough water. Well, today we know this drought has brought home the problems with that, and we've not funded the state water plan. So my point being that those of us that are our age, my age, you may not want to be included in that, my age, we inherited excess capacity so that we could build a strong economy. Our parents and our grandparents made that investment. I'm real worried that these folks are not going to inherit the excess capacity, and now they're going to have to compete on a global basis with jurisdictions that are willing to make that investment. So, in direct response to your question, I think now more than ever, when we are seeing some of the problems we have in terms of jobs and job creation, this is the time to make the investment that will benefit us over the long haul economically.